We have a Patreon. Go to patreon.com/CU podcast. You support us with monetary donations. We appreciate them. You give us the money and you get the full video podcast. In return, you get the bonus bits that we record at the beginning of this podcast. You get monthly hangouts, just about weekly writing. You can join the Pin Club, and you can vote in these poll topics. Take it away, Patrick.
Well, usually you would vote in a poll topic.
You would.
But last week there was a 50-50 tie.
Literally, the only time.
So for funsies, I put up a poll topic because you have to have at least two choices in a poll. You can't have one. Where you know this isn't a dictatorship. I said I'll put up a free space, and like clockwork, it won. Free space won at 54%, but the tie from last week at 46%. Is grading or reselling worse for video game collecting? Ian, you helped manage Luna Video Games, 2 locations, Chula Vista, El Cajon. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love you to open this about what you think is worse for video game collecting, grading or the reselling of games. Maybe the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, because I don't think, one is outright worse than the other, and I don't think any of them on their own ruin video game collecting. It's when both of those are taken to extremes or twisted, into something different. Reselling, for years, and it seems to be something that's dying down. It seems like every few years there's enemies that the video game fandom picks out, and resellers were a huge problem for a long time.
Like 10, 15 years ago?
I know, I would say, even as recently as like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, people are like, oh, fucking resellers.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the problem people have with resellers is that they buy for cheaper and sell for more. Well, that's business. That's just how it works. If you're a reseller, if you're a video game store, if you are a person who is looking for deals online, that's just what you do to make a profit. You buy the games as cheap as you can, and you sell them for, a reasonable price.
I think we make the distinction because I never, ever in my days ever equated a video game store as being a quote reseller.
We are, though. That's literally what we do.
No, but the connotation of reseller, I had to clarify this years and years back because people come up to me and say, hey, Pat, I resell games. Am I bad? And I would go, no, you're not bad. That's not how I envisioned the term reseller. It was always, what is the motivating factor and why are they in this market to begin with? That was always...
Well, so we can look at something like a flea market or a vendor at a game convention. Then.
Sure.
I still don't think, even if they're in it for money, whatever. It's a business. If you learn the business, you go and you buy the stuff, you sell it. Hopefully, you would take the time to learn about what you're selling, and get into it a little bit more so you can answer questions. Knowing what you're selling just makes you a better salesperson. People who are buying lots online to get games that they need and then reselling those games, I don't care. It's how we get the collections going. It's how you fill your collections. My bigger problem is people, and we've all known them at flea markets or whatever, who will bull other people over to get the best deals or to try to screw someone out of something and then resell it for top dollar,
or straight out lie about their motivation for buying something.
Right. Exactly.
I've seen it
lie to the person. Literally be like, oh, this is my favorite game from when I was a kid, and then go put it on a table. There are a lot of unscrupulous resellers.
I have literally been lied to several times about a motivation for buying something that I had a double of or something in my collection, saying, hey, I need this. And then I see them selling it less than a year later. I see it like, what the hell was that? And it's like, I'm not saying there's a statute of limitations when you should be allowed to, but it's happening. It happens.
And some resellers really just need to realize that there's the ones that drove me nuts was, say, during the height of like NES and Super Nintendo. People would buy the games. They would want to get into reselling. They would buy the games, and because they paid too high of a price for them to sell them at market value, they would then jump the games up $20-$30. And there are stores that I've seen do that. There are people at conventions I've seen do that. And I think a lot of people wanted to force themselves into the video game market when there wasn't a good entry point. You don't buy at the top, basically. Grading games, Honestly,
okay. I want to continue the
sure.
reselling.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I think there's something to be said for ethics.
Yes.
There's ethical business people, and that's when I usually the derogatory reseller to me was always more of the unethical sort. The sort that was more like the opportunist. You want to say the interloper. That's a loaded term when it comes to someone entering this territory to get into it, just to try to control it and to just make as much profit as possible. And obviously, if you're saying it's a business, it's to make money. But there are good ways, positive ways of doing it, and there are bad. I've known people that have gotten into it that weren't into video games. Maybe they sold records or CDs, got into it, and they learned about it, and they were fair and didn't try to do, like you said, unscrupulous tactics. And I've known, obviously, people, like the one famous one from Flea Market Madness, that was mischievous, we'll just say deceitful, and did some unscrupulous things. Like, so you see both sides that can happen there. But in the positive aspect of people that hunt to games, for games, at least in the past, when people didn't know the value, at the very least, if you want to say that this isn't game preservation, but the people that went out there to the flea markets before,
they kept the market going.
They provided the product that people that wanted it.
Yes.
They found the product. The ones that would hunt on Craigslist, ask around, go to garage sales, put the work in to find this stuff.
They kept the blood flowing, basically, in the hobby.
And they started in the mid 2000s when it started to get a little hotter. Let's go find this product. And there's something to be said for them being enterprising, businessmen back then.
Sure.
They weren't buying eBay lots 15 years ago, even probably 12, 13 years ago, that much. It was more about finding it locally, sourcing it, and redistributing it. That's actually very positive. That's positive because someone is going to do it. Someone has, and it happens with every hobby. Okay. So that's the positive of you want to say the reselling there. And obviously there's some negatives with the unscrupulous actors. Okay. Let's get into grading now. You start off by saying that they can be equally good or bad, or that one's isolated worse than the other?
Here's what I can say. I would say that there are plenty of sealed collectors or that aren't people who occasionally buy sealed games. I don't think that they're necessarily doing anything wrong. I don't think that they're hurting the hobby. I don't think it's helping the hobby.
Well, you mean grading the sealed games?
Yeah.
Okay. The sealed collectors that are grading them.
Yeah. Right, correct. Well, I just assume if it's sealed, it's being graded at this point.
But see, that's kind of problematic in itself. Because sealed game collecting, this is the argument I got into the guy. People have been collecting sealed games for, at least in my knowledge, 14, 15 years or more. It's just that it's taken a turn, I think, when the grading got introduced in a way.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't understand the grading. I don't want to do the grading. People who grade a handful of games own a couple of games that are their favorite graded. I don't care. I don't think there's anything about it that helps the hobby like there is with reselling the games, keeping the market going. But I don't think it does a whole lot of damage. I do have problems, obviously, with the sealed market collecting that is more as in the graded collecting that is looked at as an investment and only superficially looked at as video game collecting. That's where my problem is. And even that, I don't think is actually hurting the video game hobby that much. If you take a couple of steps back and you look at it and you look at what's on the floor at conventions, I don't think it's having that big of a negative impact. However, I do think the situation is fucked. The less that news covers stuff like this, the less I think it can have a negative impact on grading, and it can be or negative impact on the hobby as a whole, and can kind of just be looked at or derided as its own separate thing.
So you're saying, wait, you're saying that negative news is influenced when we think about graded games?
No, I'm saying that the damage that I can see being done by grading games is when you see these auctions go off and big numbers go out there. Just like I used to always say when you would get those CNN articles that would be like, are your games worth millions of dollars? It skews people's ideas. And it gets people into the notion of, well, maybe I should grade this and I can cash in big. Once that stuff starts to subside and there isn't that news going out there to people that don't understand what's going on, again, I think it just turns into something more annoying and less damaging.
Okay, I want to stay away from whether or not it's damaging video game collecting.
Well, I mean, that was the question, man.
No, I'm saying is it worse?
Oh, okay.
When I think of that, that's more of a generalized, like how is this affecting the scene? And when you say damage, it's like, well, how are you measuring damage? I will say this: it's not helping. There's nothing. Like you said, there's nothing positive it's doing. reselling, when you talk about the redistribution, providing a bloodline for people to get into the collecting hobby. If people weren't buying and selling games in general, there would be no subsect of buying, collecting sealed games, because it's obviously a subsection of video game collecting in general. It's a smaller part of it. Not many people do it primarily. Grading leads to, you can say, hey, Pat, it has to do with authenticating games, which is fine, but people were authenticating games before grading services. And honestly, a lot of the people that were into it forever, like Ian and me, you'd be better off in some cases with us authenticating a game than whoever they pulled off the street to do it for VGA back in the day when they started. Or I guess you can say WATA had some collectors get into it, but it's not like it's just been around for decades. This isn't like people grading coins or comics or something else where you had people in the business for a generation or two that, we have established people. We are all basically starting on the same playing field when it comes to this. Mm-hmm. If we were both collecting in the 90s, the odds are a lot of people came from the 90s or 2000s or later. It's like we all have pretty much close to the same knowledge of how this stuff should look and feel and accessing this stuff. So that's fine. So what is the motivating factor when you're getting something graded? You want that number, and that number signifies something to you and to a potential other party. That's the key, is that number. Without this number, if this was just an authentication service, no one would care about the service. No one would just say, I want to get my game slabbed and get authenticated. It's that number that drives this. That's the motivating factor. Is it a gold or a silver VGA? Is it a 9.2 or 9.4 or 9.6? Because that number equals money. It equals money. You might, when you have your games in your collection that are sealed and graded, you might think it doesn't matter. I don't care about that. But if you took it out and said to someone, hey, Ian, you want a sealed game for your collection? You like, what's an average game you like? What's a game you like?
Mappyland City Connection.
You want a sealed Mappyland or City Collection because you like those games. I say, here, fine, Ian, here's a copy. And you'd be satisfied with one that wasn't necessarily graded, right? You'd be like, it's fine. It's a nice sealed copy. Maybe I'll put a protector around it. But once you start slapping that number next to it, you then introduce something else. You introduce a factor where it doesn't just matter to you anymore. It matters to another party potentially. And that's the motivating factor when it comes to this. It's money. It's a resale market, first and foremost. That's, to me, why this is quote-unquote worse. Because a traditional video game collector can buy all this stuff and not ever think about in the future, well, what's the value of that random stack of games going to be 10 years from now? By applying a number to it, inherently, that's a concern. Inherently, that's something that differentiates it from the next person's exact same version of that game. That's the difference. If you go to a video game collection and someone is looking for a Sega Genesis game, a Quack Shot. I'm looking at Quack Shot. They're looking for it. They'd be satisfied with mostly, as long as it's not beat to hell, the first version they find at the first seller. They're not going to have to hunt through a bunch of other sellers to find a much better looking copy. They'll be fine with that Quack Shot as long as it looks decent and the game functions and it has the manual. That is the difference. Now you're introducing divisions among game collector A versus B versus C versus D. And those divisions equal different amounts of money allotment, theoretically, down the line when it goes to be auctioned and sold. That is the main difference, is that. And I've yet to hear an argument that I say, hey, Pat, this is why this is positive for the video game collecting scene. I've yet to see that introduced to me and elucidated versus just, hey, just let us do what we want. Fine, do it. But these are the facts of the matter, in my opinion, when it comes to it. And that's it. That's it. And obviously, even before you got into WATA, it was a little bit problematic. But you stopped me from talking about it. I brought up trafficking in this. When you're buying the WATA graded games now, it's a tacit endorsement in some degree of their practices by and large. It just is.
That's what you said. You went through that. You got that out.
I didn't say tacit endorsement. I like the word tacit.
Okay.
Because it doesn't mean you're signing on the dotted line that you agree with what they're doing, but by helping their business make money and profit, you are saying, hey, it's okay what they do. It's fine. I'm not saying it's right, but it's fine because I'm okay with it because I like their product. And it is what it is. I'm not saying you're a bad person for that, Ian. I don't think you're a bad person for owning a WATA graded game.
I mean, you have one too. You have two.
Well, one I bought by accident.
I mean, you still bought it on purpose. You just got the wrong one.
I did get the wrong one because I wanted the NES one, Ian.
Yep.
I wanted the NES one.